Hi there. Thanks for being here. We're going to do something a little different today. Usually in this series, I take you along with me to an historic site, and we think about how its history is told and how the stories we're told about history are constructed. Who gets to tell the story? Why do they see it the way they do? What's missing or who's missing? And what makes an historic site good? These questions lead to a larger one. Why do we single out these sites as places of historic significance? And how do we best pass those histories on? Today, I'm going to tell you a different story. A story about a place we almost lost to history. The Maliseet Trail is about 85 kilometers west of Fredericton, in New Brunswick, a province I lived in for about 2 years before starting my PhD in history in Ontario. The trail itself is pretty short, under 2 kilometers through mainly softwood forest between New Brunswick Route 165 and the Trans-Canada Highway. Hikers generally come here to see Hayes Fall, and I understand that inclination. It's a beautiful waterfall in a beautiful part of the province. On our way to the falls, though, visitors pass this big sign that sits just beside the trailhead. The sign says Maliseet Trail in this bold serif font and welcomes hikers in French, English, and what I assume to be the Wolastoqiyik language, though I'm not a speaker. Maliseet is the colonial name given to the Wolastoqiyik people. The sign has a map of the trail and this big photo of Hayes Falls, and beneath these there are 4 small columns of text that you have to get a little bit closer to read. Now, I realize I might be among the minority of people who stop and read signs and plaques, and sometimes when a sign is long and I'm in a rush, I'll walk by them too. But we visited on a sleepy Saturday, with no real agenda aside from a planned stop to a nearby brew pub on our way back to town, so we stopped. The sign explains that Fort Meduktuk was a Wolastoqiyik settlement until around the mid-18th century, located adjacent to the trail along the Wolastoq, which some call the St. John River. It gives a map of the old fort that was built there, showing its relation to the trail. The next column of text explains that an emissary of George Washington, Colonel John Allen, visited in 1775 when he came to request the Wolastoqiyik support during the American Revolution, and he returned with about 500 people who he traveled from Meduktuk down to Maine with. The sign then gives a short biography of Dr. Peter Lewis Paul of the Woodstock First Nation, who was a Wolastoqiyik ethnohistorian and an advocate for preserving and reviving cultural practices. The trail was used as a portage route by the Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot, traveling between the Wolastoq and Penobscot rivers. It's said to be the most ancient route in eastern North America, though its use seriously declined by the 1850s, and the trail was, through disuse, obscured over time. The modern Maliseet Trail, kept up for hikers, is a minor stretch of the portage route that took travelers between over 200 kilometers of lakes, rivers, and streams, and only about 20 kilometers of portaging. In 1964, Nicholas N. Smith and Dr. Peter Paul retraced the trail and staged a crossing of it after 14 years of scouting and research. They made it to within 6 miles of their intended endpoint before they were forced to stop. There have been attempts to make the crossing since that time, including a successful one in 2005 that took 9 days, but the trail traverses waterfalls, shallow waters, and private lands that make canoeing it a challenging and dangerous endeavor. When this sign was put up in 2018, T.J. Harvey, who at that time represented the Tobique-Mactaquac riding in the House of Commons, said that, although the story of the Maliseet Trail is rarely told and has been partially lost, it's not been completely forgotten, and that's very evident here today, with the hard work of all those involved. The sign was put up to commemorate this history and Dr. Paul's efforts to preserve it. It's not a hugely well-known site in New Brunswick, and the people who come here do so mainly to see the falls, and I think that's okay. This isn't my history. I'm not Wolastoqiyik. I'm not from New Brunswick, and it'd be a stretch to call me a canoe enthusiast. You know that if you saw my paddling in the Keshemakujik video. But for the local community and for the Woodstock First Nation, the site is important. It exists today because people in this area reclaimed this history and posted this sign to remind visitors to this area to be mindful of it as they come into this space. History isn't always about finding and preserving sites that embody national turning points or are the most representative parts of our nation's past. This trail's history is one about connection between parts of an Indigenous confederacy and a long history of use, followed by gradual abandonment as new modes of transportation replaced waterways as North American highways, and as colonial regimes sought to settle and regulate Indigenous communities. The Maliseet Trail doesn't matter because we've collectively decided it does. It's valuable because Peter Lewis Paul and those he inspired believed it was, and by making its history more visible, showed his community that it was important to preserve this trail and its past. It matters because local stakeholders insisted upon its meaning and revived its legacy. The stories we're told influence how we see ourselves, our communities, and our countries. It's important to remember that there are smaller histories that sometimes get obscured by grander narratives, and that these too are part of what makes our nation what it is, and us who we are. The Maliseet Trail is a reminder of a time when waterways were a primary means of travel in North America, and a time when the Wabanaki Confederacy spanned across lands that were later closed by private ownership and international borders. And it's also a lovely place to spend a Saturday afternoon. So basically, this is my appeal to you to stop and read the sign. Someone did a lot of work to put it there, because it mattered to them that it was there for you to read. We're good.
Right beside the danger sign.